told me success is the pursuit of a worthy goal. I like that because it means you're successful even when you're failing. It's a mindset thing.
If ever I'm tempted to take a shortcut or maybe jump a step, there's a gentleman, Richard Beckwith, I used to work for at Unilever, and his exact phrase, I won't replicate the accent, Leeds accent, but it was plan hard, fight easy, Anthony.
So yeah, I think in my early 20s I was the archetypal software developer. I was very comfortable in the back room and getting out and talking to people, even talking to a room of 2 or 3 people I found very intimidating.
The simple fact is that not many organisations, in my view, have got their internal systems and processes right, more processes than anything. Well, good morning, Guy. It's great to be here with you. We're here today with Guy Cuthbert, the CEO of Atheon Analytics.
Good to be here.
Thank you so much for hosting us.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
Thank you for this great room in this great venue.
Milton Keynes.
Milton Keynes, absolutely.
What's not to like?
But a lovely building in Milton Keynes, so really good. So first things first, what I'd love to do is just maybe for you to introduce yourself, explain your background and history, and a little bit about Atheon. We'll get much more into the detail around Atheon as we go, but just a brief intro would be fantastic.
Okay, well, Guy Cuthbert, founder, CEO, and up until about a year ago, CTO at Atheon. I've handed the reins over on that one now. What can I tell you about me? Computer scientist by training. Early part of my career was very technical, software architecture and bits and pieces, and then commercial roles. I know we'll come on to that. Yeah. Commercial confidence and so on later on. And then started up Atheon 2005, doing something completely different from what we do now. And then Atheon really is a game of two halves. We're nearly 20 years old now. The first 10 years was really as a consulting business where we were out in the field working with predominantly consumer goods companies and retailers, grocery retailers. But in that time we worked with airlines and banks and media companies and all sorts. I think in those early days it was a kind of needs must. You work with who's paying the bills. And the focus there was data visualization, a fairly emerging discipline in the early 2000s. So that was the first half, and then we took a lot of what we learned from working with those CPGs and started to turn that into a software platform, kind of back to my roots. SKUTrack's the platform that emerged from that, and SKUTrack today is a demand intelligence platform for consumer goods companies to better understand how they perform with their retail customers. So we collate data from major retail grocers and pull that into a software platform where we can help people to make better sense of it, to firstly sense demand and then to shape and respond to that demand. So helping people move from sort of monthly and weekly practices to daily practices, that's one of the big sort of drivers. Helping people to increase availability and reduce waste at the same time. Not easy, but it can be done. And helping people to shape demand for their products, run better promotions, introduce products with greater certainty, help set price, manage the impact of price on demand and so on. Just manage all of those complex pieces of interlinking supply and demand. And SKUTrack's a platform that does that. About 130 customers here in the UK. And I guess the big push for us, 25, 26, is going to be moving on beyond the UK.
Fantastic. That's great. And clearly we've known each other a long time. I think we worked out 18 years since we first met, and I've really seen that evolution from looking at the data through Omniscope back in the day as one of the platforms to what you guys have today, and the transition's been absolutely fantastic. And also I think the understanding that you have around what customers are needing. Sometimes they don't actually know what they need until they see the opportunity around preventing issues, maximising opportunities. So it's evolved enormously over the last 18 years. So congratulations on
Thank you very much.
on that.
Yeah.
And tell us a bit about the team.
So we're about 35 people. My co-owner of the business, Ian Hall, ex-Tesco, and Ian and I have sort of shaped the business for most of that time. And then the wider team, we've got a sort of exec team of 7 of us in total who run the functions: product, engineering, customer success, marketing, sales. Fairly young team. A lot of great talent on the across the business, but particularly on the engineering side, we've got some very capable people. And I'm proud of the product we've built, proud of the team that I've managed to build. And I guess for me, that's a lot of the fun of creating a business, is creating the team, shaping people's careers, shaping a product offer to customer. Great team. Always sort of growing and changing inevitably. We're a small and growing business, so change is kind of the heart of what we do. But great team.
Fantastic. So if we took you all the way back to the beginning, Guy, talk to us about early career. Talk to us about that transition into running and owning your own business. I'd love to hear a bit about that.
Well, as I say, I started out on the tech side, so graduated in '92. Feels like a long time ago. It is a long time ago, isn't it? With a degree in computer science, and I was sponsored through university by Plessey, who got bought during that process by Siemens. So I was destined for a sort of tech career in big business in a corporate life. Until I spotted an ad in the paper just after I graduated for a local company who wanted a software developer, and I thought I'd go and earn a few weeks' money and then go travelling. That was the plan. And 3 days into that job, I rang Siemens, as was then, and said, "Guys, I really don't want to come and work for you. I'm loving this." And thankfully they said, "Well, we've got an excess intake of grads this year, so we'd be very happy to release you." So yeah,
win-win.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I started out as the PC guy in a team of 6 people. The irony being, I knew nothing about PCs, but neither did they. So I managed to blag my way in as the PC guy. They were all sort of working on mini computer stuff, and career started there. So I guess the joys of a small business, what I could see in those first few days working there was just a degree of anarchy, a degree of chaos, but a huge amount of opportunity, and a great, for someone who's interested in exploring and sort of naturally curious. And I think if I have one trait over any other, it's curiosity, meant that I could just go and do a load of stuff. So they gave me a huge amount of responsibility. It was a business that had great ambitions and was looking to grow, and so got off to a sort of flying start with them, and just progressed through a series of roles: junior programmer, software architect, team leader. Within sort of 18 months, it was somewhat ridiculous, but as they built a sort of PC function behind me, I became the guy who was off doing that. And then sort of co-opted into commercial roles, so pre-sales. I spent a 10-week stint out in the US promoting a product that we'd built in the UK, largely on intuition. I had no formal skills in commercial stuff at that point. Set up my first business in 97, I think. At the ripe old age of 26, I knew everything. Set up a business called Simple Enterprise, which lasted about a year, and somewhat crashed and burned, but sold the remnants of that back to a former employer, and went on as CTO and then CEO of that business. And we were working in sort of that around the 2000 dot-com boom, so the whole sort of getting stuff on the internet, web shops, and we built a platform for doing EDI, the kind of exchange of documents between big businesses, something that every sort of retail CPG relationship relies on today, but we built an internet version of that. And gave me a great founding. And I guess what I recognised in that business was that, particularly going back in, having sold the remnants of the thing I'd started up back into them, was they were kind of giving me a paid MBA. They let me run riot. I could go and work in accounts. I could go and work in sales. I could work in marketing. I had an influence everywhere, and so I learned a lot by doing and failing and in time succeeding. And so when I left there in 2005 to set up Atheon, I'd pretty much done all the sort of primary functions within a small business. And whilst I don't have any of the kind of corporate experience, I've spent a lot of time in all that, those first 10, 12 years working with corporate customers. So you kind of pick up bits and pieces there, but then you learn to apply them in a small business. So that's how I got going, yeah. Well,
my experience is you would not know that you haven't got a combination of the corporate experience and the SME experience, and take that as a compliment.
But that's
we have great conversations.
And that's working with people like you and, a stack of corporate customers over the years, some of whom I've had the pleasure of working with for 10, 15, 20 years. It's fantastic.
So you talked about being the PC guy, and then moving through lots of other commercial functions, and we talked off camera about you and your potentially the challenge of getting comfortable with selling, starting in pre-sales and moving through there. So I think for anyone maybe who has that degree of trepidation about selling, your learnings and your development would be really interesting, I think.
Yeah, well, I guess I'm an introvert. I mean, I'm 100% introvert. So to some degree, I wear a mask to do this or run the business or whatever else. I think I concluded in my early 20s that if I wanted to achieve the things I wanted to do, and one thing I always knew was I wanted to create something. I wanted to create my own stuff, and for me that meant creating a business. That first experience with the very small company, it was small when I started. When I left, it was a lot larger. But that experience meant that I could see a path to turning some of the loose dreams into some kind of plan, and it became clear that I wasn't going to be able to build a product, build a business, pitch that, and sort of control growth of an organisation without the ability to stand up and talk to people. That was going to be challenging. So I think in my early 20s I was the archetypal software developer. I was very comfortable in the back room and getting out and talking to people, even talking to a room of 2 or 3 people I found very intimidating. But opportunities emerged in that business. There was a need for pre-sales support of salespeople, and I figured one way of putting myself out of that sort of intense shyness, and people sometimes sort of look at me now and say, well, hang on, you're running a business, you stand up in front of audiences doing talks and so on stage, you can't have been that shy. I used to blush, I used to go sort of bright red, opening my mouth in front of 3 people. It was that sort of chronic and problematic. So I decided to push myself into the pre-sales stuff. I'd get in with salespeople where I felt they were giving me air cover and I could shine as a product evangelist. And I think that mix of curiosity and a sort of appetite for the tech meant I could shine in those sort of very contained environments. And to some degree it was needs must, in that my boss would just say, you're coming with me, partly because he needed to lump this giant computer around and I was the big fellow who could lift it on his back, and partly because I could then sort of wax lyrical when we got to particularly technical bits. So that was the early days, and then it was a conscious effort to get out and present and start getting on stage, even at small tech events. And I think nowadays people have a huge opportunity to do this kind of stuff. If you're a technician, there are hundreds of meetups going on every week to go and sort of talk about your technical skills, and just that forcing yourself to go and stand on stage and talk to an audience on something you know a lot about. I think it's just a way of building some armour. It's horrible. I used to hate it, but I knew that if I kept doing it, it would probably get a bit easier. And so it became just a sort of mantra through my 20s of forcing myself to go and do this stuff. And then, you start to find, in this domain, I'm quite good at that. I can go and do it with some confidence. And so that ability to talk to people, that's the first thing. And I think for any introvert, that's your first challenge. It takes energy out of me doing that, so I have to go and sort of recharge in the quiet. But yeah, you build the skills, you learn some lessons. And then I guess really working in pre-sales is a great way to observe salespeople at work, and you get to see the good and the bad, see different people's styles, different
what to do and what not to do.
Yeah, and I think you the thing it taught me most was sales isn't just about pitching. Pitching's a part of it, but there's a real process there, and there's a sense of discipline and control and regimen and process and repetition, daily, weekly, monthly, those cadences. And I have tremendous respect for salespeople, having done the role and not being great at it. I'm not a great salesperson. I think I'm quite an effective evangelist. But I love to create, I love to build, I love to talk about that. I'm not great at admin, I'm not great at process. And so that side of sales was completely opaque to me before I got in and tried to do it. And having watched good salespeople and the rigour and the discipline that they bring to the table and the results they get as part of that, I think it became clear to me that I'm not a salesperson. I have tremendous respect for good salespeople, but I am commercially minded in the ability to kind of look for value, explore, because I'm curious, explore why a company works a certain way and how it might improve and what that might mean in terms of improved value. So that bit of the kind of uncovering comes relatively naturally. That's probably the engineer in me.
Through the curiosity and knowing that you can convert that curiosity into potential opportunity.
Yeah, and it's an engineering thing. If I look at my engineers, so some of my engineers are surprisingly commercial. They don't necessarily know it, and I try and bring that out to them and say, look, those questions you're asking about functionality, or why are we building a product like that, or could we use tech like this, or why does the customer want that? Brilliant. Go down those lines, because that's going to help you uncover the value. The moment a customer starts talking about their aspiration to close a value gap, we're doing X and we think we could do Y, and if we close that gap, it's worth 10,000, 100,000, a million, 10 million, whatever it might be worth. It gives you that, okay, right, so if I can solve this for you, and I think all engineers, anyone from an engineering discipline like me, you're trying to solve problems. That's what motivates you. So being able to put a price on that or a value on it, and then say, right, so if I solve this, then there's the kind of discovery piece of the sales pipeline at work. It then requires all that rigor to see it through. And as I say, it's never been my strong point. Plenty of engineers, that is the strong point, just not with me. Yeah.
It's interesting what you said there about evangelism, and I think early in my career I was very much an evangelist for the brands I sold or the product I was selling. The minute I saw some really fantastic, consistently lucky, you might say, salespeople, I realised just how much the swan is paddling away under the surface and the prep that goes in. And probably the best thing that anyone ever taught me was anticipate every single objection or difficult question you may be asked by the sales director from a certain brand owner or whoever, and think about A, what's your answer, and B, who in the room is going to say it when a question of that nature comes up. Yeah. And the level of luck just went through the roof as a result of that kind of that preparation, that prep and that conversion. So
that's interesting. It's one of the things I say in an engineering context, but it sounds like it's exactly the same there, is the plan is usually irrelevant, but the planning is massively valuable. That discipline of going through, anticipating the path you hope things take, which is always kind of easy to work out, and then actually working out what are all the things that could go wrong, how am I prepping for those, all of the objections that could be raised. Where you end up rarely is what you execute, because stuff happens. Yeah. But you've considered all those eventualities, and you've got back to confidence. I can handle this.
Yeah. If ever I'm tempted to take a shortcut or maybe jump a step, there's a gentleman, Richard Beckwith, who I used to work for at Unilever, and his exact phrase, I won't replicate the accent, Leeds accent, but it was plan hard, fight easy, Anthony. Yeah. And that meant that phrase just keeps me honest in terms of making sure that I tick all those boxes in terms of the
it's like the elite athlete thing, isn't it? You train hard and then it's easy on the day.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's the commercial equivalent. Yeah.
So having maybe got a slight knot in your stomach, a red feeling on your cheeks, how do you feel now going into those situations? Is it a good nervous energy?
I think it's rare actually to feel that nervous. So if I'm on stage in front of 500 people I don't know, there's a degree of anticipation. One of the best pieces of advice I had on that, which was probably in my 30s actually, was fear and anxiety, fear and excitement are pretty much the same physical feeling. So just reframe it. Reframe it as the positive. But it's repetition, isn't it? I think the more you do, whether it's one-to-one sessions, one-to-small group sessions, or standing in front of audiences on a stage, to some degree, you're always putting on the mask. You're choosing a way to approach the topic or the situation. But it's also harnessing a bit of the nervous energy. I think that puts you on your game. You get focused and you go in, do the best job you can. I'm sure I stuff plenty of things up still, but I worry about it less. I mean, maybe that's just a life stage age thing. In my 50s now, and a lot of stuff that used to be incredibly important to me in my 20s and 30s feels far less important.
Very distant
nowadays.
Now. Yeah. I ran a training course last week, and one of the things I pointed out, it talked about negotiation of a joint business plan, and I said one of the big watershed moments for me was realising that no one had kidnapped my children or my partner. Beyond that, how much does it really matter?
Nothing else matters that much. Yeah, exactly. It's just not that big a deal. I think that sort of change in priorities comes with experience and age.
Yeah, absolutely. So on that entrepreneurial journey, there will have been lots of people who influenced you, both positively and negatively, and people that you've sought guidance and mentorship from. Who and how have you sought those people out?
Well, the first person who had a huge impact on my career and broadened that on my life, just in terms of a lot of my thinking, I guess, was my first boss, Tony O'Shaughnessy. So Tony ran ABS, his business. As I say, it was 5-6 people when I joined. At one point, I think we reached about 80, and I think when he sold the business, it was certainly in the 50 plus employees. I had the pleasure of running that business. I had the pleasure of being CTO. He bought the remnants of my failed experiment in the back end of the 90s. And he was a huge influence on my career. Really showed me that you can, many of the mechanics of building a business and a lot of the attitude. And he and I had a very close relationship, but I think at the same time, it was love-hate at times. There were things about him that would drive me nuts, and absolutely vice versa. I know there were things about me that certainly drove him up the wall. But he really helped me sort of move from this dream of running a business to actually, this is totally practical. I can see the various mechanics and stages. So he was the first. As a mentor, he's a hands-on mentor. Yeah. He definitely coached and sort of developed me. And then I guess in the transition state from setting up Atheon, start 2005, over those first 2 or 3 years, and actually we're going to come back to Tesco many times here. Yeah. Ex-Tesco director Christine Cross. Christine connected me with all the people in the first year or so, including Ian, co-owner of the business now, and Chris, who was there at the founding of the business in the first few years. Those connections came through Christine, and Christine really helped me get into retail. I didn't know I wanted to be in retail. When I set the business up, I was doing what I would have called commercial contract management. So trying to look at the commercial side of contract structures between large buyers and suppliers. Christine knew a lot about that, knew a lot of people in that world, and just kept connecting me repeatedly with great people. And certainly in those first few years of the business, she was an informal and unpaid mentor. Thank you, Christine, for your help there. And so she definitely got me off the ground and got me focused on grocery and grocery supply chain as a kind of sector in which we could operate. Then I guess the sort of the peer relationships, inevitably working with Ian for 18 of the last 19 years of Atheon. Ian's had a huge effect on me, ex-Tesco buyer. And we early on in the history of the business, he, myself, and Chris, who was founder at the time, spent some time together looking at what we wanted out of the business. And Ian's always been super clear. He's very focused, very operationally minded, very, very different from me. We definitely complement each other. We're definitely the yin and yang. I describe myself in the CEO role as up and out, so I'm always sort of looking outside the business and up to what we could be. Ian's looking at, but what are we today, and are we actually billing this week? And if it hadn't been for Ian, we would have gone out of business multiple times, probably over the past 19 years, because my tendency for innovation and staring at the stars isn't always what pays the bills each month. So Ian's been an incredibly powerful foil for me in that time. And Chris, Chris had a very important impact on me in the first couple of years, with Christine kind of linking me with both those guys, and Christine being the catalyst for grocery retail. Ian and Chris are the guys who'd actually done it. They had the little black books of CPGs from being buyers, Chris's case at Asda and Ian's case at Tesco. So those guys, and then I guess latterly, the last 10, 15 years, a very good friend of mine, David Arms, who runs a consulting business. If you want commercial confidence, you don't need to look any further than that guy. He's taught me a lot about understanding value, charging for what you're worth. I think certainly in the early days, particularly perhaps for introverts, it's quite easy to get focused on charging cost plus a bit.
Rather than value.
David's a great exponent of value. What can the customer pay? What's the customer willing to pay? What's the value of this to them? Okay, look, charging 3 times what you think is necessary is still fair.
There's lots of value in there.
And the customer's going to get a great result. Yeah. David's been an instrumental in shaping a lot of my thinking around maximum value. And we had an 18-month period working with a kind of coach Chris, Ian and I, a chap called Alan Wick. Alan did a fantastic job for us in getting us through the transition from a consulting business to setting ourselves up to become a software player, because that transition takes a change in mindset. It absolutely takes a change in risk-reward structures. And Alan really helped galvanise us as a team and show us how we could operate with a set of protocols and processes that largely we've left unchanged. We've built on them. A different business from the one we were when Alan worked on us 14, 15 years ago. But the fundamentals were laid down by him then. So those people have all been instrumental.
Fantastic. And I think it would be remiss of me personally, given we're in a public forum, not to mention very fond memories of Chris Fisher, your co-founder. Fantastic guy, some great times.
And I learned a huge amount from Chris, not least how to think about, so many stories. I could come back to Chris, just his lessons from his time at Lidl, at time at Asda, his time at Walmart Germany. Chris was really instrumental in getting me into the detail of how do you analyse a retail business and CPG business. I'd argue a lot of his thinking way ahead of his time.
Yes.
And I remember doing work with him at Morrison's and at several CPGs, and what we were building was amazing. Couldn't always translate it into the organisation. I think we were probably building stuff that was a bit too sophisticated, but Chris had a visionary perspective on retail analytics.
Yeah, I've got many fond memories of Chris saying to me, have you got 10 minutes, and showing me something in my data, genuinely really fond memories, and he was so enthusiastic about what he'd unearthed, and it was always valuable.
Yeah, another great evangelist. Chris was a great evangelist. Over in New Zealand now, and I think enjoying his retail career over there.
Yeah, absolutely. We wish him well.
Yeah.
So, coming to the present day and coming to the retail landscape, clearly there are organisations probably in your 130 client list who are absolutely grabbing the opportunity to harness the data, the insight, and driving real business change.
Yeah.
Maybe there are other organisations where there's opportunity to really embed those processes in their business. But how have you seen it change over the last maybe 5 years post-pandemic?
I think if I look at our world, which is still coming from the data side, so we talk, a lot of our customers talk about data and they think about data. We're much more interested in talking about the uses to which you can put that. And so when we talk about demand intelligence, we mean the processes and protocols and behaviours that you can embed in an organisation to better respond to demand based on the data you have about that demand. So if I sort of wind back 10 or 15 years, everything we were doing around data visualization was new. No one had seen the stuff we were doing. You'll remember the first time you saw Omniscope.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Omniscope's where we started, and that was just something that blew my mind when I first saw it. And really the business became what it did because of a sort of chance meeting.
How can that many opportunities be missed? I think was my immediate reaction when I first saw kind of some of the compliance gaps, some of the availability gaps, and the consequences of natural shopper demand going against what the retailer systems thought was the demand. It blew my mind.
Well, I think I'd say even today, where every business today I think is used to a Power BI or a Tableau or a Looker or a Click, or everybody has some degree of data visualization in place. 15 years ago that just wasn't the case. But even today, I'd say there's still a difference between data visualization and visual analytics. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole because it's going to take the rest of this session. But businesses that can really use visualization to drive innovative thinking are relatively few and far between. A lot of it is still sort of putting up the obvious graph you would have done in Excel anyway. That was truly sort of mind-blowing for a lot of people when we first started doing it. It's become much more commonplace. 10 years ago, it was becoming the sort of language of enterprise businesses. 5 years ago, Power BI and so on the rise. In the last few years, everyone's got data visualization. So that's rarely a sort of game changer. 7, 8 years ago, all the hype was big data. 5 years ago, big data. I remember Gartner doing the hype cycle on big data, and ironically, a few weeks ago I was at Big Data London, the data expo in London, at which, other than on the banner as you walk in where it says Big Data London, no mention of big data inside the building at all, because the tech world's moved on. Yeah. The tech world loves a bandwagon to jump on it, loves a phrase. I'll give you one guess as to what the buzzword across every single stand was this year. Yeah. Well done. Yeah, I think if you'd fail on that one,
we'd have cut that out.
Absolutely, definite cut. Yeah, I mean everything now, even the most spurious things, had an AI sticker on them. Yeah. And it's flavour of the month. And I'm sure in 2 years, 3 years' time, there'll be something else on there. So that sort of whole big data phase. Don't get me wrong. A lot of the tech underneath that is still being employed by people today, albeit a lot of them have gone down a path, realised it's much harder and much less out of the box and just sort of roll this out than they had originally thought. And so people are entrenching, and even organisations, enterprises who probably sort of downgraded some of their use of our tech because they were going on a global data lake project or whatever it might have been, are back in the last 12, 18 months saying, this is all a little bit harder than we thought, or the global team saying, actually, it's not going to be this year, it's another 3 years. Can we come back and, can you guys help us solve this part and that part? So I guess the last piece really would be the inevitable rise of SaaS and the whole software as a service thing, which 10 years ago was relatively unheard of beyond perhaps Salesforce. Yeah. And nowadays, of course, most people expect to buy their tech that way. So the data visualization journey, big data coming and going, and the sort of rise of SaaS as an acceptable way of buying software and buying tooling. And I think probably along with that goes the sort of the change in ERP. You're on our favourite customer and past employer, Nestle, who kind of would be the archetype of the world that only uses SAP. That was it, and now is a bit more. Probably it's going to be SAP sits at the kernel, but we're bolting all these new systems on around it.
The right system for the right need to drive the right demand.
The world's changed, and the we only use SAP. I don't think there's anyone left doing that. So it's a blend of all those things.
Yeah, absolutely. So given whether it's globally instructed data lakes or it's local solutions, clearly that level of data harnessing has stepped on massively. Yeah. How much more insight rich do you think organisations are?
Yeah, okay, so you're now touching on my...
Slightly loaded question, but...
Well, it's one of my soapboxes, and this is the interesting thing, and it drives me nuts talking to retailers, less so probably with CPGs than retailers, that it surprised them that insight doesn't just mean shopper.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. If you're a retailer, having a stack of insight about your shopper is critical. But insight doesn't mean shopper, it's not a synonym. Insight is available at every sort of part of a business. You can develop insights on processes, you can explore insights on products, as we would argue. I think a lot of businesses are still very data rich, insight poor. That's where a lot of our work still comes from, is how do you translate all of that data into genuine intelligence that you can make smart decisions about demand. If you're trying to align supply and demand, if you want to make the right amount of stuff and move it to the right place so that you get as close to 100% availability with as close to 0% waste. If you recognise you can never actually get there. You can't possibly have perfect availability and zero waste. It's never going to happen. But you can certainly move a lot further than many organisations have. And the best of the best, the best of our customers recognise that and have made material dents in both those factors. And we've achieved that in a consulting footing with some of our grocery clients. So we've done consulting projects in the past with the big grocers and helped them drive behaviours down those paths. In the last 10 years with SKUTrack, it's really been helping CPGs to look at that, recognise that they have a huge part to play, understand that the retailer doesn't know everything, and that actually what you want to do is take the retailer's perspective and weave it with your own insight to build a collaborative picture, and then better go back to the retailer and make a strong case with good evidence. And the evidence comes from data, but it comes not from raw data, it comes from the insights you extract from that data, the things you discover, and being able to communicate those in a clear way. And that's where we come back to data visualization, because it's usually much easier to tell the story with a couple of appropriate graphics than it is to write an essay on why people should order 60 more cases every Wednesday to this depot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was looking at some data with Ian the other day, and there was a manufacturer whereby 7 of their 8 promotions in a particular retailer on the same product executed absolutely brilliantly, but just one instance where the process just fell down internally, and there was a 5-figure loss in sales associated with that problem. And Ian and I maybe spent an hour together just getting into some of the data with some of the bigger clients. And there's opportunity everywhere you look. And the simple fact is that not many organisations, in my view, have got their internal systems and processes right, more processes than anything, to make sure that 7 out of 8 becomes even fewer than that.
Yeah, you want 99 out of 100, don't you?
Absolutely.
7 out of 8 is still 12.5% of your
Absolutely.
promos executing poorly. You scale that up for a CPG spending typically tens of millions on trade promotions over the year, and you're looking at a huge amount of money at stake. There's the age-old question, the kind of, I know my advertising works, I just don't know which half. Half my advertising works, sorry, I don't know which half.
Yeah.
Paraphrasing badly. You apply that to promotions, I know half my promotions work, I just don't know which half. You should. There are plenty of tools to evaluate promotions, and it's difficult. It's not easy. You require great data, great tools, and great processes. But if you bring those 3 things together, there's a huge opportunity to better understand what is and isn't working. And that comes down to, activities that are poorly planned. You just, at the planning stage, if you'd really evaluated well, you would have simply struck that promo. It wouldn't have been executed. But far more common, most organisations are getting better at the planning. Not all, most are. But far more common, it's execution. It just doesn't execute the right way, and yet many of the behaviours are quite formulaic. You can plan what should be happening a month out, a week out, day 1, day 7, and how you track good availability during the stock build pre, the run out post. All these things are kind of set patterns, and yet 1 in 8. That's probably at the better end of the spectrum.
Absolutely,
there's plenty of organisations that are probably operating in 1 in 4, 1 in 5 is problematic. So there's a huge amount of insight potential. It's about transforming the data into insight, and it's about acting on the insight.
Yeah, absolutely. The other instance that we found looking at the data was the number of instances where a promotional activity in one particular store, if that store is in the top 10 in the country, by default it should be performing in the top 10 of them. And there were stores where those particular brands, it was 70, 80, 90, where it should have been in the top 10, just massively underperforming, not by any really obvious indicator in the data, but due to a perennial undertrade where you have to look back over a longer period of time.
Yeah, context is important there, but you're talking now about the sort of the more subtle and the more nuanced and the evolved stuff.
Absolutely.
I still see promo data and promo patterns that it shouldn't have been planned in the first place, but stuff where 10 days out you could tell it's going to fail. The product's not reaching the depots, or at least 3 depots haven't got the product, or 2 days out the product hasn't reached the store. Well, you're guaranteed a fail day 1, and you know how important that first week is. Absolutely. In any kind of promotional cycle. If you don't get the first week right, you're in a world of pain. You're playing catch up, and particularly if you're in short life product, you're probably building a set of stock that's then going to go out of waste into waste 3 weeks after the promo finishes. So it's hard to catch up if you don't get the foundation right. It's really difficult.
Prevention over cure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things we also talked about recently was around, if you're going to really drive yourself from data rich to insight rich, is having a change agent in an organisation, and the importance of a couple of people who are prepared to kind of push against the norm or challenge the way that things have been done around here. And maybe you could share a perspective on where you've found some great change agents and what that's meant for driving efficiency and sales improvements.
Yeah, it's the hardest part of the whole thing. The tech ultimately isn't that hard. It's easy for me to say because that's what we do, and we've built a lot of tech that that now works very reliably, and so we can come to the table with a set of technology that is going to collect data and organise it and look after it and analyse it in a reliable way. But people are far less reliable in that sense. So the best of our customers will have typically a senior sponsor who's really motivated. They're not there, as a sign the check. They're actually driving a program. There's I come back to I always come back to Jimmy Coulson at Yoplait. There are many others, but Jimmy strikes me as the kind of guy who's got that brilliant balance between a vision and shirt sleeves rolled up. He knows where he wants to go, and he's very willing to dive in with his team to make that happen. So kudos to him. But there are many other examples. The reality is, without good sponsorship and good project management, and that's in our world, that's often less about sort of technical project management and much more about repetition. How do you ensure that the message from the sponsor, the message from the change leader, if you like, is being applied on a daily and weekly basis? And a lot of this comes down to kind of those cadences. I think for many organisations who perhaps historically have looked at supply chain and commercial performance on a monthly basis, you look at month end to see how things were, and you'll do some week, Monday morning, the usual year on year and sort of week on week stuff. Great, but a lot of the benefits that you get from a good application of insights and actionable insight is daily. It's about having a rhythm that means you're willing to intervene in the relationship with the retailer every day. You don't need to intervene every day, but you've got to have the processes and the mindset that says, if there's something arising today, we're going to get on it today, because we can understand what went right and wrong yesterday, and we can make an impact that solves a problem that's going to occur tomorrow. That sort of yesterday, today, tomorrow, thinking that way and moving on that sort of 3-day cycle, particularly in sort of customer collaboration and even demand planning and other sort of supply chain pieces in support of the commercial function, really makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I think if I'd had my time over again, and obviously it's been a long time since I've been a business manager in a CPG business, the change in mindset wouldn't have been what did we sell. In every single question, it's what could we have sold. Yeah. That one simple shift as a mindset, as a way of working, as a way to look at how you enhance your processes would have changed everything. It just happened I met you guys a bit late in that, and I was sort of moving into other things at that point.
And honestly, we probably weren't preaching that message at the time. It's taken a lot of time. You look back and you think, how much of what I've learned could I have compressed? And some of it is you can't. It was a combination of where you are at the time, where the business is at the time, where technology is, where your customers are. I'm sure you can always do things a bit faster, but sometimes things have a natural rhythm. But that point of how do you act on making a difference of every day, it's a mindset that I still see a lot of organisations think in weekly and monthly terms. But and this is a criticism. Chris would always say, you can't sell a category, you sell a product. So if you're going to intervene, if you're going to get something done differently, it's about products in stores. It's not about categories across a retailer.
Yeah.
Categories across a retailer give you a long-term picture, wonderful. But your day-to-day action isn't categories and retailers, it's stores and products.
Yeah, you don't win a marathon in miles, you win it in inches.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the things that we as Sellex stand for is building commercial confidence, and we talk a lot about commercial confidence. So in order to kind of wrap up the conversation, I'd love to understand your take on things that you have deployed or ways that you think to drive your own commercial confidence.
I guess I've talked a bit there earlier about my own personal journey as an introvert, from recognising I couldn't do it. And this is the classic NLP sort of process of unconscious incompetence. In my teens, I had no idea I couldn't run a business. I just thought, I'll magically be able to do that one day. I think in my 20s, I developed that sort of conscious incompetence. I started to realise, you haven't got most of the skills you're going to need to do this. And so at ABS, and that's a small business environment where I could go and explore, it gave me a fantastic ability to go and explore. And then you start to develop some of those skills, you start to develop a bit of conscious competence, and then it gets to a point where when you ask me to prep for this and think about, what does commercial confidence mean to me, I have no idea. It's just how I operate. Well, it isn't. It's a set of skills I've accumulated over 30 years, and it's easy to kind of forget just
get into autopilot.
How difficult life was at 21, 22, 23 when I knew none of this stuff. So what I come back to, I guess, is because I'm an engineer at heart, I come back to an engineering mindset. So when I think about what is it that one needs or I need in order to be to have commercial confidence. I approach it from a sort of an engineering mindset. So that for me is firstly being curious. As I say, I think everything in my pattern, this works for me. It's not necessarily the pattern for everyone. Is a genuine interest in what's going on in customers. So if you understand the challenges and opportunities that a customer faces, you can start to build some empathy, a bit of insight into, hang on, if we fix this, then I now know where to go looking in the data. So that curiosity of how does the company work, what are the processes at play, what's the data telling me? The data is only ever thrown off by those processes. It's a representation of how the business operates. It's never the business, but it's an approximation. The more fine-grained, detailed data you can collate, the more fine-grained and detailed the picture you build of the business. So that curiosity is the first thing. I suppose that goes hand in hand with what I'd describe as being thoughtful. So being sort of deliberately thoughtful and stepping back. And every time you've got a pattern or a mantra or a shortcut, think about why that's true. Anytime you can figure stuff out from first principles, you've got a much better chance of really understanding the topic. And again, the age-old adage, if you can explain it to somebody else simply so they understand it, you probably understand it well yourself. Yeah. If in explaining to someone you realise you're getting stuck, you probably don't understand it as well as you think you do. That discipline of thinking things through and writing stuff down and mapping things out, really important. So curiosity without being thoughtful, probably limited value. Yeah. Curiosity and being thoughtful together, I think that's the sort of engineer's mindset. So on top of that, I guess I would say be experimental. There are so many things we've tried at Atheon. The tech world and the venture world likes to call them pivots.
I prefer that word to people talk about failure. Pivot sounds great to me.
Yeah. So but I think a willingness to fail and recognizing that success comes at the end of a series of failures.
Yes.
You cannot be successful all the time. Someone once told me success is the pursuit of a worthy goal. I like that because it means you're successful even when you're failing. It's a mindset thing. So repetitive experimentation, some successes, many failures. You focus on the successes, you learn from the failures, and you start to move that way. But if you can't experiment and change, you're never going to get anywhere. So that's on yourself and it's on the kind of process around you. And then be humble, and that means, I think, to be truly commercially savvy, you've got to do the job. You've got to be prepared to roll your sleeves up and go and sell at the front line, or go and work at the coalface doing the thing. Particularly in an organisation where you're looking after a commercial structure, is unless you've done that frontline job, unless I knew how hard it was to go and sit and pitch brand new business as a frontline sales guy, I think it would be much harder for me to work with the sales team that I do, and even to have the sort of evangelism, some of the sales success that I do as an individual. So be curious, be thoughtful, be experimental, be humble, and many of the best CPG and retail senior leadership that I've worked with, and I've had the pleasure of working with a great many on projects over 20 years, the really, really good people have all done that frontline role. And in retail, that means they've worked in store.
Yep.
They've probably done 6 to 18 months in store doing the store manager's job, or even, they started out stacking shelves and so on. They've actually done those frontline jobs, and
probably want to go and do it every now and then again to remind themselves. I think
and when they're then looking at the organisation and they're looking at change to process and thinking about the impact of data, or whatever it may be, these grand 3-year, 5-year programmes, they're also thinking about how will actually translate into store on a week-by-week basis. You've got to have that ability to sort of move at different mental levels.
Absolutely.
Curious, thoughtful, experimental, humble.
Fantastic. You summarised it for me, so that's absolutely perfect, guys. So thank you ever so much. So absolutely, last thing to say is thanks ever so much for your time. Really appreciate it. We wish you a fantastic set of trading for the remainder of 24 and a really successful 2025. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you.